4. A Life Reborn. 1 February 1991, 3:27 p.m. I became a mother. Awaiting induced labour at the Moedersbond Maternal Hospital in Pretoria at 6 a.m. in the morning, the peculiar convergence of destiny overwhelmed me. This sacred space, where my own adoptive journey started 24 years prior, now witnessed another miracle, the imminent arrival of my son. In the same hospital, same city, another life was about to emerge. As my obstetrician examined me, primal fear seized my body. His gloved hand, poised to determine the baby's position, triggered an instinctive tension. Clutching the bed railings tightly behind my head, I strained to calm my racing thoughts. The doctor advised bluntly, "Ma'am, I suggest you talk to the nurse about an epidural delivery. I've only put my hand in there, but there's still a baby that needs to come out. You are clearly rather a candidate for an epidural." Relief washed over me. Those prenatal classes really paid off. I knew an epidural would make labour a breeze. But for a split second, I wondered why I freaked out over the doctor's touch. Didn't I want a natural birth? In the operating theatre, a mere couple of hours later, the doctor thrust a tiny, wriggling bundle into my arms, saying, "Meet your son, ma'am. Put him to your breast. Let's see if he'll drink. He's quite a tall baby, but he's perfectly normal, so you may hold him." Time stood still as I gazed at my newborn's tiny mouth latching onto my nipple, sucking instinctively. The medical staff beamed, calling it a phenomenal sign, bonding so swiftly after birth. I was transfixed, lost in another world. The surreal moment clashed with tingling sensations in my breast, assuring me this was unmistakably real life. 90 precious minutes passed before medical staff gently separated us for his first bath. At 5 a.m. the next morning, I opened my eyes to find my tiny miracle sleeping serenely beside me in his mobile bassinet. Overnight, I'd transformed into the mother of a healthy little baby. All my fears subsided, those fears of not knowing how to answer the doctor about my familial medical history. Throughout the years, I've learned it's best to simply say, "I'm adopted. I don't know anything about my biological family." And then watch the different reactions, nervous smiles, averted eyes, and swift topic shifts. When my mom and dad came to visit me earlier in my pregnancy, I mentioned to her that the doctor inquired about my family history. My mom replied, "We can go to the agency who handled your adoption. Their offices are still here in Pretoria. Let's go. Then we can find out about your birth mother. I'll come with you." Her voice and body language revealed no hesitation. Instinctively, I sensed genuine concern for my well-being and my unborn son's. In that moment, my adoption secrecy no longer mattered. Her unwavering support did. That same familiar fear gripped me in its stranglehold. It numbed me to my core. My answer was a definite final. No, I don't want to search for her. She didn't want me. She gave me away. I'm not going to dig up a situation that I might not like or want. What if she's told no one about me? What if she's a woman of whom I won't be proud? What if she lives in squalor somewhere? What if she messes up my life, our lives? No, no, no. To soften the blow of my vehement reaction, I gave my mom a tight hug, and we both relaxed under the warmth of our mutual embrace. We never referred to this incident again. My son's healthy arrival brought overwhelming relief, ending all thoughts of reconnecting with my birth mother. 2 weeks later, relocating back to my hometown Oudtshoorn, Gurik slept peacefully on my lap, cushioned by a giant continental pillow. I was deeply in love, craving every moment of physical connection, touching, cradling, and especially breastfeeding him. His reddish-hued blonde curls sparked curiosity. Was it a bloodline trait? My husband Kobus and I pondered. His growth exploded at an incredible rate. 6 weeks in, he weighed 6.5 kilograms. My mom's lovingly knitted booties were instantly too small for his gigantic feet. Clearly a giant in the making. That familiar question resurfaced. Which side of my unknown family, mother's or father's, held the tall genes? At 1.83 meters, I towered, unlike Kobus's family. Fleeting thoughts vanished amidst Oudtshoorn's whirlwind, fueled by Kobus's new business venture. One nagging concern lingered. My neglected vanity case from Pretoria, collecting dust in our bedroom corner. Months passed before I opened it, discovering a mouldy face cloth. Disgusted, I discarded it and unpacked the remaining contents, wondering why I'd delayed. Struggling in Oudtshoorn, I felt perpetually exhausted, overwhelmed and lost amidst Kobus's photographic studio demands. My mom's daily childcare was my lifeline. Her calls, "Boetie's awake, hungry," prompted frantic rushes to feed Gurik. Often my mom soothed his gripes while I rushed back to the studio. Her devotion was priceless, and I cherished her bond with my precious son. I was passionate about breastfeeding, nurturing Gurik until his 2nd birthday. By then, public outings became awkward as his plump little hand slipped under my blouse, pleading, "Milkies, Mommy, milkies." A silent vow drove me, never to abandon my child as my birth mother had. Breastfeeding secured our bond. I alone could provide this nourishment, forging an unbreakable connection. Life in Oudtshoorn shattered our rosy expectations. Our marriage was falling apart, its unravelling evident, yet unspoken. We'd been married a little over 3 years, and since falling pregnant, we'd not been intimate once. In 1987, Kobus and I met at a Pretoria daily newspaper, I as journalist, he as photographer. Knowing he openly identified as gay, our conversation sparked a bond. Months later, love blossomed. Kobus shared his childhood traumas, revealing deep-seated discomfort with his sexuality. He felt repulsed and was eager to change. I listened with compassion and empathy. When he claimed to have altered his sexual orientation, I trusted him wholeheartedly. Shortly before our wedding in 1988, a colleague warned me over coffee in a cafeteria. Are you 100% sure about this relationship? What if he can't change and prefers men? My body reacted instinctively. Throat constricting, stomach tensing, jaw clenching and palms sweating. I forced a whisper. I'm fine. Everything's okay. He's changed. We love each other. He'll never be with another man. I swiftly ended the conversation. Chapter closed, move on. Kobus's past remained my deeply guarded secret, hidden from my mom, my dad, and the world. Pregnancy solitude unleashed dark visions, catching him with another man. Overwhelmed, I'd envision rage, biting words, and anguish. Yet, Gurik's gentle kicks soothed my turmoil. I'd savor another bite of chocolate, calm washing over me, dismissing the haunting fears. In Oudtshoorn, darkness closed in. Endless battles shattered our illusion of bliss. Masks slipped, revealing raw pain. My exhausted heart struggled to conceal the cracks. Finally, in September 1993, I mustered the courage to end our marriage. The relief etched on Kobus's face mirrored mine. I was grateful for my mom and dad's nearby love and support, and hoped that Gurik's tender age of 2 would shield him from lasting pain. Their shock at Kobus's truth was met with compassionate silence, never revealing hidden suspicions. Looking back, I realize I wasn't alone in suppressing painful truths. Our coping mechanism was familiar. Closing chapters, turning pages, and moving forward.